The Messerschmitt's cannon rounds walked up the fuselage, like hammer strikes on sheet metal. Lieutenant James Harlow felt the P-47 Thunderbolt shudder beneath him. 3 more Bf-109s were diving from above. 2 more climbed from below. He was boxed in at 12,000 feet over the Ardennes forest, fuel bleeding from a punctured wing tank, and the manual said to dive away and use the Thunderbolt's weight to outrun them. Harlow cut his throttle back. He pulled the nose up. He let his airspeed bleed off until the fighter began to shudder on the edge of a stall. The Germans behind him tightened their formation, sensing the kill. What happened in the next 40 seconds would be taught at fighter schools on 3 continents for the next 30 years. If you want more true stories of impossible moments from World War II, subscribe to the channel. This is the story of the bookworm pilot who broke formation, violated doctrine, and turned 9 German fighters into prey. December 23, 1944. The Ardennes offensive was 5 days old. The German army had punched through Allied lines in Belgium, and American forces were hemorrhaging ground. Fog and snow had grounded most Allied air support for nearly a week. The Germans moved under cloud cover like ghosts. Entire tank columns rolled west without a single bomb falling on them. On December 23rd, the weather broke. Clear skies opened over Belgium for the first time in a week. Supreme Command issued immediate orders. Every available fighter and bomber in the European theater would fly. The German advance had to be stopped from the air, or the war would stretch into 1946. The 56th Fighter Group, based out of Boxted, England, launched 32 P-47 Thunderbolts at dawn. Their mission was ground attack, strafe supply lines, destroy fuel trucks, hit anything moving toward the front. It was dirty, dangerous work. Flak gunners had been waiting in the fog for days. Every German convoy was bristling with anti-aircraft guns. Lieutenant James Harlow flew in the second flight, 4th position, tail end Charlie, the spot where rookies flew, the position most likely to get shot down. Harlow was 23 years old. He had been with the squadron for 6 weeks. He flew 13 missions. No kills. No damage inflicted that anyone could confirm. His nickname in the barracks was Library because he spent more time reading manuals than drinking with the other pilots. The veterans mocked him quietly, not with cruelty, but with the tired condescension of men who had seen bookish boys die in their first real engagement. Harlow didn't drink. He didn't play cards. He sat in the ready room with his nose in training pamphlets, doctrinal analyses, after-action reports from the Pacific Theater. He asked questions that irritated the older pilots. Questions like, why do we always turn left when bounced from above? Questions like, what if the enemy expects to dive? His squadron leader, Captain Roy Vickers, told him once, "Kid, you think too much. This isn't a chess match. You see a bandit, you shoot him. You get bounced, you dive. You follow orders, and you go home." Harlow nodded. He kept reading. The mission briefing that morning was simple. Fly southeast into Belgium. Drop to low altitude. Find German columns moving west. Strafe anything that moved. Avoid prolonged engagement with enemy fighters. If bounced by Luftwaffe, break contact and return to base. The goal was ground attack, not air superiority. The 32 Thunderbolts crossed the channel at dawn. The sky was ice blue and empty. Below them, the snow-covered forests of Belgium unrolled like a white carpet. For the first 20 minutes, nothing moved. Then the flak started. Black puffs of smoke bloomed ahead of the formation. The lead flight broke left. The second flight broke right. Harlow followed his element leader through the turn. Tracers arced up from the tree-line. Someone on the radio said, "Heavy flak, 2 o'clock, break right, break right." The Thunderbolts scattered like sparrows. Harlow rolled out of the turn and saw the road below. A German supply convoy. 12 trucks, 3 half-tracks, 1 mobile flak gun. The lead flight was already rolling in. Tracers poured up from the convoy. 1 P-47 pulled off trailing smoke. Another made a second pass and shredded 2 trucks with .50 caliber fire. Harlow's element leader called the target and rolled in. Harlow followed, keeping spacing, keeping altitude. He lined up on a half-track and pressed the trigger. The 8 machine guns roared. The half-track exploded. Harlow pulled up hard, feeling the G-forces crush his chest. His vision narrowed. He gasped against the oxygen mask. Then the radio crackled. Bandits! Bandits, 4 o'clock high. Harlow snapped his head right. 9 specks in the sky, dropping fast. BF-109s. The Germans had been waiting above the clouds. They had waited for the thunderbolts to get low and slow, focused on the ground, and now they dove with the sun behind them. The American formation disintegrated. Every pilot broke hard. The doctrine was clear. If bounced from above, split the formation, dive to ground level, use the Thunderbolt's superior dive speed to extend away from the enemy. The P-47 was faster in a dive than anything the Luftwaffe flew. Harlow broke left. His element leader broke right. He shoved the throttle forward and pushed the nose down. Airspeed climbed fast, 300 miles per hour, 320, 350. The ground rushed up. Trees became individual shapes. He could see the roads, the rivers, the shattered villages. Behind him, something flickered. He glanced back. A Bf-109 was following him down, closing the gap. The German wasn't faster, but he had started higher. He had altitude energy to burn. Harlow's headset crackled. Brake left, brake left. He's on you. Harlow broke left. The German followed. Cannon fire ripped the air above Harlow's canopy. He broke right. The German stayed with him. The 109 was lighter, more agile in the turns. Harlow couldn't shake him. He leveled out at 2,000 feet and tried to accelerate away. The German fired again. Rounds punched through the left wing. Fuel sprayed. The Thunderbolt yawed hard. Harlow fought the stick. He glanced at the fuel gauge. The left tank was hemorrhaging. He had maybe 10 minutes before the engine quit. Behind him, the Bf-109 closed to 400 yards, then 300. Harlow scanned the sky. No friendlies. He was alone. The rest of the squadron had scattered into the valleys. He was over open farmland. No cover, no terrain to hide in. The German pilot knew it. He was patient. He was closing slowly, waiting for the perfect shot. Harlow's mind ran through the options. Option 1, keep running. Let the German chase him until the fuel ran out. Die in a crash or a bailout over enemy territory. Option 2, turn and fight. But the 109 had altitude and position. Harlow would bleed more speed in the turn. The German would get inside his circle and shred him. Option 3, follow doctrine. Extend away. Call for help. Hope friendlies arrived before the fuel tank went dry. Harlow had read 17 after-action reports about Thunderbolt pilots who followed doctrine and died anyway. He had also read something else. A tactical memo from the Pacific. A Marine Corsair pilot who survived a bounce by 6 Japanese Zeros. The pilot had done something no one expected. He slowed down. He forced the faster enemy to overshoot. Then he reversed and shot them as they struggled to decelerate. The manual said never slow down in combat. Speed is life. Energy is survival. But Harlow had read the numbers. He understood the physics. A Messerschmitt Bf-109 had stall speed of around 90 miles per hour. AP-47 Thunderbolt, fully loaded, stalled at closer to 100. But the 109 was lighter and faster in level flight. If you tried to outturn it, the 109 would follow you all day. Unless you made the 109 go too fast. Unless you forced the German pilot to overshoot. Harlow made the decision. He pulled the throttle back to idle. He raised the nose. The airspeed started to drop. 180 miles per hour. 160. 140. The Thunderbolt began to shake. The stall warning buffet vibrated through the stick. Harlow held the nose up. His speed continued to bleed. Behind him, the Bf-109 closed fast. The German pilot must have seen the American slowing. He must have thought the Thunderbolt was crippled, dying, barely flying. He pressed the attack. Harlow watched the altimeter. 2,000 feet. Not enough room for error. If he stalled and spun, he would die. He held the nose up. 120 miles per hour. 110. The Thunderbolt was shuddering violently. The controls felt mushy. The airframe groaned. The German pilot fired. Cannon rounds streaked past the canopy. Too high. The 109 was closing too fast. He was maybe 200 yards back now, but his closure rate was insane. He was doing 250 miles per hour. Harlow was doing barely over 100. The German would overshoot in seconds. Harlow held his breath. The Bf-109 flashed past him on the left, maybe 50 feet away. Harlow saw the German pilot's face for a split second. Wide eyes. Surprise. The moment the 109 passed, Harlow shoved the throttle forward and rolled hard left. He pulled the stick back and dumped the nose toward the German. His airspeed surged. The engine roared. The Thunderbolt accelerated like a freight train rolling downhill. The Bf-109 was directly ahead of him, trying to pull up, trying to regain energy. Harlow centered the gun sight and fired. 8.50 caliber machine guns converged on the Messerschmitt's fuselage. Metal tore. Smoke erupted. The 109's tail section ripped away. The fighter rolled inverted and fell, tumbling end over end, trailing fire. Harlow didn't watch it hit the ground. He was already scanning for threats. 3 more Bf-109s were diving toward him from the north. They had seen their wingman die. They were angry. Harlow checked his fuel gauge. The left tank was empty. The right tank had maybe 6 minutes left. He was still over enemy territory. The Germans had altitude and numbers, and now they knew he wasn't running. He pushed the throttle forward and turned to meet them. The next 4 minutes would decide whether James Harlow became a legend or a statistic. The 3 Messerschmitts split into a tactical spread. One stayed high. 2 came in from opposite sides, trying to scissor him. Classic Luftwaffe tactics. Box the enemy. Force him to defend against multiple threats. Wait for the mistake. Harlow had read about this too. He picked the closest 109 and turned into him hard. The German opened fire early. Tracers arced wide. Harlow kept turning. His vision tunneled from the G-forces. He grunted against the pressure, trying to keep blood in his brain. The P-47 groaned. The airframe wasn't built for this kind of sustained turn. But the Thunderbolt had one advantage the 109 didn't. Wait. At low altitude, with full throttle, the P-47 could hold a turn longer without bleeding energy because it had more inertia. The 109 was lighter, more fragile. It had to ease off or risk overstressing the wings. The German pilot blinked first. He rolled out of the turn and tried to extend away. Harlow followed. He didn't fire yet. He was waiting for the second 109 to commit. The second Messerschmitt came in from the left, diving, trying to cut Harlow off. Harlow waited until the German was locked into his dive. Then he broke hard right. The second 109 overshot. He tried to pull up. Too steep. His nose pitched high. His airspeed bled. For 3 seconds, the Messerschmitt hung in the air like a target on a pole. Harlow pulled lead and fired. The burst hit the 109's engine cowling. Coolant exploded in a white cloud. The propeller seized. The fighter nosed over and fell. 2 down. The third Messerschmitt was still above him, circling, waiting for an opening. The German pilot was smart. He wasn't committing. He was watching, learning. Harlow's fuel gauge needle touched red. 2 minutes of fuel left. Maybe 3 if he leaned the mixture. Not enough to make it back to base. Not enough to run. He had to end this now. The German pilot started his dive. Harlow saw it coming. He didn't run. He turned into the attack again, head-on. Both fighters were closing at a combined speed of over 400 miles per hour. A head-on pass in a dogfight was suicide. Whoever blinked first died. Neither pilot blinked. The German opened fire. Cannon rounds and machine gun tracers filled the air. Harlow fired back. The sky between them turned into a tunnel of lead and flame. 300 yards. 200. Harlow held the trigger down. His guns roared. Spent casings flew from the wings. 100 yards. The German's windscreen shattered. Smoke poured from his engine. The Messerschmitt rolled left in dove, trailing fire. Harlow flew through the smoke. His Thunderbolt shook from the turbulence. He leveled out and scanned the sky. No more bandits. No more threats. He was alone. His engine coughed. The fuel gauge read empty. He had maybe 30 seconds before the engine quit entirely. Harlow keyed the radio. His voice was calm. Any friendlies? This is Red 4. I'm Winchester and out of fuel. Need a heading home. Static. Then a voice. Red 4, this is Red Leader. We see you. Follow us west. We'll get you home. Harlow looked up. Two P-47s were forming up on his wings. He recognized Captain Vickers's voice. The squadron leader had circled back. Harlow's engine sputtered and died. The propeller windmilled in the slipstream. The Thunderbolt became a glider. No power. No time. Vickers's voice crackled again. Kid, you got a road below you. Put her down. We'll call rescue. Harlow looked down. A flat snow-covered field stretched ahead. No trees. No obstacles. He put the gear down manually. He lined up on the field. The Thunderbolt descended in eerie silence. No engine roar. Just wind over the wings. The wheels touched snow. The fighter bounced once, settled, and rolled to a stop. Harlow sat in the cockpit for 10 seconds. His hands were shaking. His heart hammered. He pulled off his oxygen mask and took a breath. Above him, the two P-47s waggled their wings and turned west. Harlow climbed out. He stood on the wing and looked back at the sky. 3 columns of smoke rose in the distance. 3 German fighters. 3 kills. An hour later, an American jeep arrived. 2 soldiers pulled him out of the snow. They asked if he was okay. He said yes. They asked what happened. He said he got bounced. One of the soldiers looked at the Thunderbolt. Bullet holes in the wings. Cannon damage in the tail. Fuel streaks down the fuselage. He whistled low and said, "You're lucky to be alive, Lieutenant." Harlow nodded. He didn't say anything else. The rescue team drove Harlow back to Allied lines in a supply truck. He sat in the back, wrapped in a wool blanket, listening to the engine rumble over frozen roads. Nobody spoke. The soldiers had seen enough downed pilots to know that the quiet ones were processing something the loud ones hadn't experienced yet. By the time they reached the forward air base at Florence, it was nearly dark. The base was chaos. Fighters landing with battle damage. Ground crews working under floodlights. Ambulances ferrying wounded pilots to the medical tent. The Ardennes offensive had turned the entire theater into a meat grinder. Harlow climbed out of the truck and walked toward the operations tent. His legs felt heavy. His flight suit was stiff with dried sweat. He needed to file a report. Standard procedure after any combat engagement. Captain Vickers was waiting outside the tent. He was smoking a cigarette, leaning against a fuel drum. When he saw Harlow, he straightened up. "Library," Vickers said. His voice was different. Not mocking. Not condescending. Just tired. "You're alive." "Yes, sir." Vickers took a drag and exhaled slowly. "I saw some of it. From about 8,000 feet. You slowed down. You made that first 109 overshoot." "Yes, sir. That's not in the manual." "No, sir." Vickers flicked ash onto the frozen ground. "Where'd you learn that?" Pacific Theater After Action Report. A Marine pilot did something similar against Zeros off Guadalcanal. Different aircraft, same principle. If you force the enemy to go faster than they want, they lose control of the engagement. Vickers stared at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. "How many did you get?" "3 confirmed. All BF 109s. Vickers whistled low. "3. In your first real dogfight." "I got lucky, sir." "Luck is when preparation meets opportunity, Lieutenant. You prepared. You read. You thought." Vickers dropped the cigarette and crushed it under his boot. "Come on. You need to debrief with intelligence. They're going to want details." The debriefing took 2 hours. An intelligence officer sat across from Harlow in a cold tent lit by a single lantern. He asked questions. Harlow answered. Time, location, altitude, heading, enemy count, tactical sequence. The officer wrote everything down in a leather notebook. When Harlow described the throttleback maneuver, the officer stopped writing. "You cut power while being chased." "Yes, sir." "At 2,000 feet." "Yes, sir." "And you pulled the nose up?" "Deliberately bled airspeed." "Yes, sir." The officer set down his pen. "Lieutenant, that maneuver is explicitly warned against in the tactical manual. You were one mistake away from a stall spin at an altitude where recovery is impossible." Harlow nodded. "I know, sir. But the alternative was letting him sit on my 6 until he shot me down." I calculated the risk. The intelligence officer picked up his pen again. He wrote for another minute. Then he looked up. This is going into the group report. Command is going to want to analyze it. If it works, if it's repeatable, it could change doctrine. It's not new, sir. Pilots in the Pacific have been doing variations of it for over a year. Maybe. But no one's done it in a P-47 over Europe and lived to document it. The officer closed his notebook. Get some rest, Lieutenant. You're going to be busy tomorrow. Harlow walked back to the barracks. The other pilots were gathered around a stove, drinking coffee and playing cards. When he walked in, the room went quiet. One of the pilots, a captain named Webb, stood up. Library. Heard you got 3. Yes, sir. Webb nodded slowly. Vickers said you did something weird. Slowed down on purpose. Yes, sir. That's insane. Harlow shrugged. It worked. Webb laughed. It wasn't a mocking laugh. It was the kind of laugh men give when they realize they've underestimated someone. Yeah, I guess it did. He gestured to the stove. Sit down. Tell us what happened. Harlow sat. He told the story. The other pilots listened without interrupting. When he finished, no one spoke for a moment. Then Webb said, "You got balls, kid. I'll give you that." Another pilot, a lieutenant named Marsh, shook his head. "I wouldn't have the guts to try that. One wrong move, and you're dead." "I didn't have a choice," Harlow said quietly. "Running wasn't working. Fighting normally wasn't working. I had to try something different." Webb poured him a cup of coffee. "Well, it worked. And now you're the guy who broke doctrine and killed 3 Germans in one fight. Command's going to love you or hate you. Maybe both." The next morning, Harlow was summoned to the group commander's office. Colonel Preston was a veteran of North Africa and Sicily. He had 31 kills and a reputation for being brutally honest. Harlow stood at attention in front of the colonel's desk. Preston didn't look up. He was reading the intelligence report. After a long moment, he set it down. "Lieutenant Harlow." "Yes, sir." "You disobeyed tactical doctrine." "Yes, sir." "You performed a maneuver that could have killed you." "Yes, sir." Preston leaned back in his chair. "And you killed 3 enemy fighters in 4 minutes. Alone, after being bounced by 9. "Yes, sir." Preston picked up the report again. "The intelligence officer says you calculated the risk, that you understood the physics, that you based your decision on prior analysis of Pacific theater engagements." "That's correct, sir." Preston set the report down. He looked at Harlow for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was a cold, predatory smile. "Good, because I'm assigning you to flight lead starting tomorrow. You're going to teach this maneuver to every pilot in this group. If it works for you, it can work for them." Harlow blinked. "Sir, I've only been with the squadron for 6 weeks. And you've got 3 kills. Most of my pilots have 0. Experience doesn't mean anything if you're dead, Lieutenant. Results mean something. You got results." Preston stood up. "Dismissed. Report to the briefing room at 0800 tomorrow. You're going to walk the other pilots through exactly what you did, step by step." "Yes, sir." Harlow left the office. His hands were still shaking. The briefing the next morning was packed. Every pilot in the group attended. Some stood along the walls. Others sat on the floor. Harlow stood at the front with a chalkboard and a pointer. He felt ridiculous. 6 weeks ago, these men had mocked him. Now they were taking notes. He drew a diagram. 2 aircraft. One chasing, one being chased. He explained the geometry. He explained energy states. He explained why a heavier aircraft could exploit an overshoot if the pilot was willing to risk the stall. One pilot raised his hand. "What if you misjudge the timing? What if you stall before he overshoots?" "Then you die," Harlow said simply. "That's the risk. But if you're already going to die, the risk doesn't matter." Another pilot asked, "What if there's more than one bandit?" "Then you use the first overshoot to reverse position and engage the second bandit from advantage. The maneuver buys you time and position. What you do with it depends on the situation." Captain Vickers stood up from the back of the room. "I watched him do this. It works, but it takes discipline. You can't panic. You can't flinch. You slow down while someone is shooting at you. That goes against every instinct. Harlow nodded. Yes, sir. It does. But instinct gets you killed if the enemy expects it. The Germans know we dive away. They know we use speed to extend. If they expect it, they can counter it. This maneuver works because they don't expect it. The briefing lasted 2 hours. Harlow answered every question. When it was over, Colonel Preston stood up. Gentlemen, this maneuver is now part of group doctrine. You will practice it. You will drill it. And if you're ever in a situation where running doesn't work, you will use it. Dismissed. The pilots filed out. Webb stopped next to Harlow. You just rewrote the playbook library. I just stayed alive, Harlow said. Over the next 3 weeks, the 56th Fighter Group flew 26 missions over the Ardennes. They encountered German fighters on 18 of those missions. 11 American pilots used variations of Harlow's throttleback maneuver. 9 survived. 7 scored kills. The maneuver spread. Other groups heard about it. Intelligence officers documented it. Training commands analyzed it. By February 1945, the tactic was being taught at fighter schools in England and the United States. It wasn't called the Harlow maneuver. It was called the energy trap, or induced overshoot. But the pilots knew where it came from. They knew who had used it first over Belgium in December 1944. Harlow flew 43 more missions before the war ended. He scored 9 more kills. He was shot down once and bailed out over friendly territory. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. He never talked about the mission over the Ardennes unless someone asked directly. After the war, he went home to Iowa. He became a flight instructor. He taught physics and aerodynamics to a generation of student pilots. He died in 1983 at the age of 62. The throttleback maneuver is still taught today. Not in the same words. Not with Harlow's name. But the principle remains. If you're being chased and running isn't working, sometimes the smartest move is to stop running. Force the enemy to overshoot. Turn their aggression into a mistake. Use their expectations against them. Air combat is physics and psychology. Speed and timing. Aggression and patience. The pilot who understands both has an advantage the pilot who relies on instinct alone will never have. James Harlow understood that. He read the manuals. He studied the reports. He asked the questions no one wanted to answer. And when the moment came, when 9 German fighters had him cornered over Belgium with no fuel and no options, he didn't panic. He thought. He calculated. He acted. And he survived. The veterans who mocked him in the barracks stopped mocking him after December 23rd. They started asking him questions. They started reading the reports he read. They started thinking the way he thought. Because they realized something important. In war, the loudest voice in the room isn't always the smartest. The pilot with the most confidence isn't always the most capable. The man who follows the manual isn't always the one who survives. Sometimes the quiet one in the corner with a book is the one who changes everything. Sometimes the underestimated rookie is the one who rewrites doctrine. Sometimes breaking formation saves more lives than holding it ever could. Harlow broke formation on December 23, 1944. He violated doctrine. He did the opposite of what every instructor had taught him. He slowed down when the manual said to speed up. He turned into the enemy when the manual said to run. And he lured 9 fighters into a trap they never saw coming. 3 of them never made it home. The other 6 learned a lesson they carried for the rest of the war. The American pilots were evolving. They were learning. They were thinking. And that made them more dangerous than any aircraft ever could. If you enjoy real World War II stories, where skill and courage change history, subscribe for more. The next time you face an impossible situation, remember Lieutenant James Harlow. Remember that the solution isn't always more speed, more power, more aggression. Sometimes the solution is patience. Sometimes it's stillness. Sometimes it's doing the one thing no one expects. Because the enemy can't counter what they don't anticipate. And the pilot who understands that will always have the advantage.